And thank you very much for joining us here on another edition of the Manifesto Tracker. Today it's the corruption debate. And I'm joined in the studio for this analysis by Adam Senanu, who is a co-chair of the Ghana Citizen Movement Against Corruption. Mr. Senanu, thank you for your time.
And thank you, too, for having me.
Listen, we had planned to have this conversation last week. He will attest to that.
That's true.
It had nothing to do with Martin Amidu.
No,
we didn't know that it was going to happen.
No clue.
Yes. And it just happened that it fell in the week when a lot has happened on this big word called corruption, with 19 days to a major elections. And I guess it's just the right time also to do it, Adam.
Yes.
So I want to quickly go through, Mr. Senanu and his colleagues have put together some analysis of the party's manifestos. We picked up some of the key promises they're putting forward on this area to deal with corruption. We'll get to analyze what the anti-corruption campaigners make of it. What we start to do always is to, Mr. Senanu, what we do on Manifesto Tracker is to do the number game, okay? So if we look at the manifestos, NDC has 9 policy proposals on dealing with corruption.
Okay.
MPP has 4.
Okay.
So that begins to tell you, because from opposition to government, you have a certain view of it. You want to...
Well, I mean, sometimes you wonder whether the number is realistic. In this election, honestly, looking at some of the manifestos, it's just like put everything possible there.
Yeah.
But the context of the financial state of the economy and of this nation is such that if you give us too many promises, we begin to wonder where are we going to find the money to do all these things. So the numbers by themselves probably is not a good indicator. It's more probably the quality
of the promises that they are making. So here, the NDC has a big ticket anti-corruption proposal.
Yeah.
I didn't find one big ticket item for. I mean, this is sort of the anchor.
Absolutely.
You know, for the NDC. MPP has nothing like that. In 2016, I think that's where the office of the special prosecutor
was a big thing.
Was a big thing.
Yes.
You know, was a big thing, and
which they could still have put there and say we'll continue to.
In fact, if you look at their manifesto, the bulk of the first 100 or so pages is accounting to us when it comes to what they've done before.
Exactly.
And I want to keep, this is blank because we are looking at 2020 to the 2020 manifesto.
Yeah.
But if you go back to what they've done, the Office of Special Prosecutor was their big item back then.
Absolutely.
We all know what has happened to the office. And not the office, to the occupier of the office.
Well, and that occupier has, to a large extent, determined how far establishment of that office has come. I mean, if you look at the later correspondence, it tells us that that office could have been functional probably a year ago if the person had accepted a building. Yeah. He didn't. Here we are.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Senanu, I must say, I have heard you say before that Martin Amidu himself is part of the problem.
Yes.
Of what we've seen in the last few days.
Absolutely.
That you cannot absolve him of blame.
No,
what is that?
Not at all. I mean, and it's so sad. I mean, he's been economical with the facts and the truth. It is clear that his personal posture in terms of engaging with other stakeholders to get results has been such that he kept changing his mind and probably has just worn everybody out such that they didn't even want to come to inaugurate the building for him. And then he took offense at that as well. I don't think that we probably also need to look at emotional, psychological profile of the people we appoint to these positions.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard before somebody close to the board say there's a tense relationship there too, right? With the members of the board of the OSP as well. I mean, so that is for the MPP in 2016, but now we don't have any big. Let's look at the NDC. Operation Sting. They say it's the governmental reforms as part of Integrity for Development Action Plan. My question here, Mr. Senanu, is this Integrity for Development Action Plan, we haven't been told
what it is.
What exactly?
I agree. And there are many high-level promises that have been made without enough content for us to be able to interrogate what actually is this saying. When I read this, plenty of words. I'm not quite sure what it means, Integrity for Development Action Plan. I would have rather they picked key pressing issues in the anti-corruption sector now, pick the NACAP, and tell us that this and that aspect, because the NACAP is comprehensive, and say, this is what we are targeting, funding for this. ensuring that we have data that we can quickly process and see whether you're making progress. Talk about, let's say, fast-track anti-corruption courts, so that we no longer have a situation where there seems to be a backlog of things. What are the specifics? Otherwise...
Yeah. I mean, so thankfully, we're joined also later by Mr. Sam George, is an MP for Ningo Prampram. Hopefully, we can get to break down what Operation Sting is, because going into election and getting corruption is going to be a big campaign item. An issue that possibly could turn the elections this year. Very, very possible as well. So whoever is promising or proposing the best solutions to deal with it, I guess, for the middle class mostly, these are very important for the middle class. Let's look again at the NDC. The NDC also has enacted conflict of interest legislation for all government officials. What do you make of this policy proposal?
I don't understand it, because we have the Public Officers Code of Conduct Bill, which is quite comprehensive. It talks about not putting yourself even in a potential position of conflict of interest. That is one of the most well-crafted policy documents I have seen. That bill has been passed. So in my mind...
Oh, it's an act now? It remains in the past? Okay.
That has to be passed.
So, but then doesn't that then justify why the NDC will say legislation? They want to now make it a legislation?
Yeah, I would have been...
A conflict of interest legislation?
Yeah, I would have been comfortable if you just said, look, this bill is there. We are going to bring stakeholders together, finalize it, pass it, make sure it is there and it's being used. Because there are portions that Traj already has as an administrative justice tool for people to look at. To say enact a conflict of interest legislation for all government officials, I think begins to suggest we don't have something already. We do. Let's polish it. It's something that many governments have contributed to. So
but this certainly will be an enhancement of what we already have.
It will.
If it do. Let's go to the MP. The MP says they will continue to improve on the institutional and the legislative reforms to strengthen institutions. This is, must say, vague a bit. I mean, so how are you exactly, what was the word, strengthening the institutions? So is it more funding, timely funding? And as we see in the special prosecutor's case, I mean, I don't even think that is probably an outlier, because if the government statement is true, they possibly would have given him a lot in terms of monies to set it up. But many of the institutions suffer. Shraj has struggled. NCC has struggled to get funding to do its job. I don't know about Yoko and the others, but it has been one of those chorus.
In general, because the resource envelope has been tight, government tends to ask receivables comes in, then they decide how much they are allocating and giving you. For some of these independent institutions, what should happen is we have ring-fenced funding that gets to them, irrespective of what is happening elsewhere. Better management of the economy is needed. I think that the speed with which some of the legislative reforms also happen, because as we go along, we can clearly see what the challenges are with some of the legal frameworks. The speed with which we work with the judiciary to say, no, this thing is not working, and then the parliament looks at it and does the reform would be very helpful. The correspondence on the SPO suggests that the government had done quite well in trying to be upfront in providing the support that SPO needed. If that's what is being done for all the institutions in the anti-corruption sector, then we are making good progress. But it needed to be spelled out.
Spelled out clearly. Okay, so that is the both sides on that key subject. MDC again said it will strengthen collaboration between, and that is the NACOP and the Food and Drugs Authority. And I don't quite, when I saw that, I don't quite understand the anti-corruption. Well, NACOP, of course, I mean, the cocaine and narcotics control, it's important. I mean, we see how the Food and Drugs Authority also comes in there in terms of regulating that particular space. Because stuff that you can use in drugs can also pass as, illicit drugs as well. So if you strengthen that collaboration, you could deal with that problem. But again, the question I ask on Manifesto Tracker is that when dealing with anti-corruption, is that a need? Is this something, is it a problem? Is this a problem for you as an anti-corruption campaigner? That for which reason somebody should propose a solution, an anti-corruption solution for?
At the moment, nothing major crosses my mind in relation to that. So,
so it's one of those needs assessment that you need to do in terms of the promise. But MPP says continue to improve the financing of governance and anti-corruption MDAs. it almost suggests here that they believe they've done well, and they just simply want to continue. Is that
I think it's
true?
Fair if you remember that the Auditor General kept saying, he's received better funding.
I remember doing an interview with Dumalobu where he said,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And then if you look at what the current correspondence from the presidency, I'm sure informed by Ministry of Finance on what they've done for the SPO, is anything to go by, then yes, there's at least some major aspects of the anti-corruption MDAs who have received good funding, and probably, yes, they're talking about how they work at that. So.
Okay. You made a very important point. If this is true, I wonder how it reflects in one of the key metrics, the Anti-Corruption Perception Index, for example, the Corruption Perception Index. So if it's true that they are doing this a lot, what has been their performance? We'll track that shortly, because I have a graphical representation of the trend over time. That will tell us a story shortly. Okay. NDC says, make single source procure. This, I remember NPP made a big deal of this also. You don't seem to...
It's not impressive. I mean, they've all said this at some point.
True, yes.
But new king, new law, somebody gets in there and starts doing their own thing. I mean, nobody knew that an ABAJ would sit there and be doing interesting things. So, an exception and not a rule, we've heard it before. Unless they tell us how that is going to happen, we're not quite sure what it means.
So, but I want your analysis and comment on this. This government passed the right information, but I've heard anti-corruption campaigners say they just passed it, but they have failed to operationalize it. People who have tried to go under this have struggled to get information.
Yeah.
And they say provide resources for the Right Information Commission to operationalize effectively the Right Information Law. But the way it's happened already, does it show that they have the credibility and commitment to do this?
Well, unfortunately...
I guess the question, have you seen enough?
No. I mean, there was a 1-year span within which this was supposed to happen. It hasn't happened. One of the things they ought to have done was probably to give some understanding of the gaps. It's just like what has happened in Martin's case, where now we have clarity. This is what was done. And so all of us are comfortable to say it wasn't that government was just sitting and doing nothing. Somebody needs to speak to the fact why 1 year after, nothing has happened. And people are still struggling to get that the information. So yes, after 20 years, we say we passed the law. Hooray, but nobody is getting access. So have we gone or have we come?
So it begs the question. I mean, this is forward-looking. And I wonder, for a government in power, should you be saying, I'll provide, you should have told me that you have provided the resources.
Absolutely.
Rather than saying you will provide, because you passed it, you created it. So you should have fixed it by now.
I agree.
So that's a key comment on this. I want to quickly also go to this next slide where it talks about NDC says implement the CRC amendment of Article 78. This is the part that says, of course, the president can appoint people, ministers from Parliament. They say they want to amend it. I mean, to reflect what the CRC recommend. You agree that that creates a situation where MPs become ministers and then that becomes a corruption?
Yes, that's true. The executive influence on the legislature is too much because of this, because many of those MPs are looking for ministerial positions, and then the ability to have an objective, independent position on matters is compromised. But to be honest with you, at this stage in the life of Ghana, we need a new constitution.
Okay, and
let's forget all this tinkering with bits and pieces of the constitution. 1992 was done to suit a particular person. That era has gone. There are just too many challenges at different points of our constitution for us to do something like this. If NDC is serious, they should go the full hog. We want to see someone talk about a totally new constitution. Let's start the process.
And it's interesting because the CRC was their baby.
Yes, we will take on board, they can take on board the recommendations of the Constitutional Reform Committee. That's not a problem. But most of us in good governance and in anti-corruption, clearly in our minds, we need a new constitution.
Okay, I mean, so that's an interesting one that we've seen. Again, you will seem blank because, as we said at the beginning, NDC has far more policy proposals when it comes to the area of anti-corruption than the MPP has in the 2020 manifestos. Now, the NDC is strengthening the Auditor General's office by safeguarding its independence.
Yeah.
Again, I was curious, the specifics. Yeah. Because everybody knows, as it's played out, a case is in court.
Yeah.
Whether the president
This is obviously scoring points. This is, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Because they've seen the controversy and, you know,
I think it's
a question of the how.
Yeah.
So how exactly? Will they, for example,
it.
pass a law to say the president cannot direct him to go on leave?
Well, I guess that...
Make it clear.
Yeah, I would have said the danger we saw is that the president could apply to any of the independent institutions of state. Okay. In which case, you should look at the constitutional environment and get a Supreme Court ruling that makes it clear that these institutions are such that nobody can begin to say, go on leave and so. It is not about the Auditor General's office per se.
But you made a point. They singled this out because...
They're scoring some points.
Yeah, there's some points to be scored there. I mean, this is politics. Remember, the manifestos are designed to win an election. Yeah. So why not? I mean, increasing support for IOCO, NACO, financial institutions. I mean, this is... MPP has a similar thing there. Resource anti-corruption agencies, both of them agree that should happen. But when they come into power, it doesn't seem
another story.
It doesn't seem to materialize. I mean, we know that. Also, NDC says, introduce conflict interest, moral, civic education in the high school curriculum. Would that help?
Yes, it will. But actually, most of us think that it should start from primary level.
Okay.
Because when you look at the formative years, there's a lot of data that says that the younger they are when you get this into them, much better. So not just high school. We need to start from primary school.
All the way down. That then deals with the thing. Now let's look at the track record. What have they done? And this is just one area. NDC, the next, and this is the 20... 12. This is the NDC 2012 manifesto.
Exactly.
The next NDC administration will implement the Freedom of Information Act once it is passed by Parliament. They didn't quite do this. In fact, they didn't do this. They didn't realize this.
I remember in the tail end of 2016, it was in Parliament, and there was that whole debate to the very last day.
Yes.
Look.
And it died.
And it died.
It died with that Parliament.
It died with the Parliament.
So the track record says NDC promised back then they couldn't really do it. But if you come to MPP, they also had promised in 2016 that amend the law relating to asset declaration to provide for sanctions, which may include forfeiture of appointment. That hasn't been done, has it?
No.
It hasn't been done. So clearly, that is also a track record issue for the MPP.
Yeah, the current state of it is not fit for purpose.
Yeah.
And it critically needs to be looked at. I know that somebody had told me that, look, the overseers and whatnot say that
if you publish it, they'll come for you. That's why possibly that's all. Now, here's the big thing. This is this is a track record conversation. This is the Corruption Perception Index over from 2010 all the way to 2020. Okay. I mean, we don't have the 2021, so we are talking about 2019. This is still, I guess, the most credible measure of how it's a perception, but it's universally accepted. John Mahama was 2012 to 2016. He had the lower you are, the worse your performance in terms of corruption perception.
Yeah, that's true.
The higher you are, the best you're doing in terms of perception. So John Mahama holds the record, as he shows, for our best performance on the CPI. This is fact. You can't change it. You can't change. You can't argue. I'm not saying it. It's just there, right? As you see. But here's a controversial thing, and I guess the MPP guys wouldn't like to see it. And of course, John Mahama wasn't here. Under this current government, they've probably scored the next lowest in terms of corruption perception, scoring in our history. Because the last lowest was in 2011 under Mills. The next lowest is under this current government, right? And so if you're doing a comparison between John Mahama and Nana Addo, just based on the Corruption Perception Index, this is a win in the sale of the NDC, pointing at the statistics.
Well, it's interesting. I've had some discussion recently where people say, look, the more you talk about corruption, the more corruption, the perception of corruption increases.
Yeah, what do you make of that argument?
It's false. The research doesn't show that. And I think that when governments have these type of ratings, it means that the efforts made by that government, however small, are not being trumpeted enough. They are not in the public space so that citizens who will be asked their perception can say, oh, I'm aware this government is doing this here, is doing that, etc., etc. So there's
that's a very important point. You could be doing a lot, but if people don't know, then they'll rate you poorly.
Absolutely. So there's a need where governments are taking concrete actions. rather than keep silent and then say it's like, okay, we're doing the best we can. You've got to be out there so that the perception of the fact that there's tolerance, goes down. People can say, no, these people are very serious. They are robustly dealing with it and so on and so forth. So just like what has happened in the recent correspondence where we suddenly discovered that, my God, 3 buildings, all the way up to a 10-story building.
Yeah.
If you don't put that in the public domain and somebody goes to ask them, they don't know, and they're like, nah, you're not doing enough to support the institutions.
Yeah, I mean, so if you look at 2017 to 2019, the bars are pretty low. And the disparity is pretty huge, just visually looking at it. Yeah. As in the John Mahama period and the Nando period, they definitely will have to do a lot about this to bring it back up to our best performance in 2014, which is 48%.
And honestly speaking, if the governments think that by going quiet on the issues of corruption and good governance, we will talk less about it, and then citizens would score them better. That's a risk. That's a high risk.
Yeah.
They ought to be at the forefront of making sure they're engaging, making sure that the stakeholders are brought together, we can see and understand, and we can make suggestions and input to improve whatever is being done. Otherwise...
Yeah. You know the beauty of this conversation after you've done your analysis? Yeah, we're going to be speaking to a man who used to be the Ghana Integrity Initiative boss.
Which of them?
Yababia Samoa.
I knew it would be YB.
Because they generate the data for the CPI.
I know.
I mean, and the CPI, for now he's a spokesperson for the party.
I know.
You know, so I wonder what his reaction
I'll love to listen to that.
I wonder what his reaction to be to this graph. Finally, I want to quickly end by just showing you what the cost of corruption is. And this is CDD saying that since its inception, and you've been part of the Corruption Watch programming. Since its inception in November 2017, Corruption Watch alone has discovered 9.6 billion Ghana cedis stolen from public purse. And this is H. Kwesi Prempeh, who is the executive director of CDD, making this. Can you imagine what this amount will do to an economy like Ghana?
Yeah, and that is why any politician who ignores good governance and anti-corruption does so at their own peril, because many people are watching. I keep saying that, look, if you take our 2 major parties, they have a core membership who always vote for them. That's probably 43%, 43 or 45. They're not more than 43, 45. There's a 10 to 15% neutral, independent who swing. And they swing based on their understanding of who seems more serious and will ensure the kind of environment where I'm confident my business will grow, I'll have less problems, and so on and so forth. The middle class, upper class thinkers. These are the kind of things that help us make our decision. I'm an independent. I have voted both ways.
Okay.
These are the things that make me start thinking that now, which of these two are really going to do something serious?
Yeah. Let's see what the period also going back to NDC showed, because this is just, to be fair, this is Franklin Kujo. He said, my estimation about grand corruption in this country, this is in May 2016. Looking at the numbers from the Auditor General's report, on an annual basis, and doing an extrapolation, looks to me about $3 billion a year is going down the drain. I mean, the figures are just, no matter how you look at it,
phenomenal.
It's just phenomenal.
Gargantuan.
Martin Amidu. Thank you very much, Mr. Senanu.
And thank you too.
Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you too.
Right after this, I'm going to be joined by Yababia Samoa, who is the communications director of the NPP. He is a member of parliament for Adentan constituency. He's agreed to join us. Thankfully, he used to be the boss of the Ghana Integrity Initiative, and so corruption, this is his forte. This is where he plays. Anti-corruption, I mean. And then we'll also be joining us is the man you know, Sam Jatta George. He is a member of parliament for Ningo Pram and also a member on the communications committee in parliament. Join me, don't go anywhere. I expect this to be pretty interesting and fascinating. Stay with me. And thank you for staying with me. This is the Manifesto tracker every Wednesday evening. Thank you to Mr. Senanu for helping us walk us through the two parties' manifestos. Joining me in the studio now is Yao Babian-Samwa. He's the Communications Director of the NPP. He is the Member of Parliament for Adentan constituency, and I'm delighted that he could join us in the studio. Also with me is Sam George. He is a Member of Parliament for the Ningo Pram constituency and a member of the Public Accounts Committee that scrutinizes the Auditor General's reports over the period, and of course they ask a lot of questions also. I want to start with the Babian-Samwa for obvious reasons, because of what has transpired over the last 1 week or so. He actually penned a statement on the back of the Martin Amedu issues that had played out leading to his resignation. And as we indicated in the analysis, we are talking about manifestos. In 2016, the MPP's big ticket item in addressing the issue of corruption was the introduction of the promise to set up the Office of the Special Prosecutor, a promise that they fulfilled in the establishment, passing of the law, and the fulfillment of it, and the appointment of Martin Amedu. Mr. Babian-Samwa, now we're in an election again. We are doing manifestos again. The whole 360, and the anchor of that particular office has resigned. And in this week, alleging that the government had no intention to fight corruption at all in creating the office, and that there was a plan to, you thought you could use him as a poodle in your own agenda. That goes to track record, people say, that you don't have the track record if you believe Martin Amedu.
Thank you very much, and good evening to your viewers, especially to my constituents in Adenta, who I believe are watching PM Express, as they always do.
Just before you go, and I just need to say, Matama, because we know that as you've watched corruption, as you watched Manifesto track over the time, it's sometimes very controversial. Parties are pitching and putting forward their manifesto and selling it. Sometimes it gets very heated. But let me lay the ground rules as we've always done on the show. We want decorum at all times. I mean, respect each other in the conversation. Stick to the facts. Name callings are not allowed. I mean, if it gets too heated, as we've done before, we'll take a break. The person obviously will be asked to remedy. If not, of course, I mean, we have to respect our audiences and have a very decorous conversation that serves your interest. In essence, we just want the two parties to articulate the issues in their manifestos, help you make a decision who to trust. And that's all we want to do tonight. And so we hope that the two gentlemen will respect the audiences in articulating what their manifestos have said they will do in dealing with corruption. Mr. Wamata, back to the question.
Of Mr. Martin Amedu.
Yes, and what this means to that big promise of OSP, which you fulfilled, but seem to have unraveled with Martin Amedu's resignation.
And it's very unfortunate. I have said my good evening to Adentan, and it's unfortunate. I think Martin is history and ought to be, and that his conduct ought not to determine the nature and structure of what we want to take forward as the Office of Special Prosecutor.
His conduct?
Yes.
What are you talking about?
Have you read the President's response to his letter?
I have.
Yes. His conduct is rather that which debarred the office from going up, rather than interference. That's what I'm trying to say. The President's letter was very clear. He was giving all the support he required to establish an institution, a working institution. And if you have a pledge that hinges on legislation and the establishment of an institution, then the NPP would have achieved both, because we were able to pass legislation to establish that office, a unique office with independent prosecutorial powers. In the kind of environment we are in, the milieu for corruption that we have, it is clear that that is what we needed. An office with capacity to move beyond anybody, including the president. The law is there. It's been established. Parliament gave those powers. The question of whether or not the Attorney General could even hive off some of those powers. You remember? It was a huge debate. And in conclusion, we all determined that, yes, the Attorney General could do so under Article 884, where he could authorize others to do prosecution. So in a sense, that authority was vested in this statute and set up the office. So Martin was independent, he could do it. The next thing was the occupant of the office. And clearly, there are two issues at stake. One, having the office is one thing. Having the person credible enough in our context is another. I believed that the president, in all sincerity, appointed Martin because at the time, Martin had the biggest halo in terms of anti-corruption in this country. An attorney general who had left government to fight causes that he believed ought to have been fought by an attorney general.
Were you one of those who endorsed his appointment?
I'm not the one who proposed him.
Oh, I know. I mean, I know. I'm asking because I know there are people in the party who thought
I thought it was a
dangerous,
bold act of political will on the part of the president because it demonstrated then that the president was desperately serious. To have an opponent in the nature of Martin run such an office whilst you are an incumbent, I thought was the boldest statement of all that the president was sincere about this fight because nobody, and still nobody, can control Martin.
If that was true, why is Martin saying that the president interfered with his work?
But that's the question we are all asking now. And that is why the New Patriotic Party came out. We believe that whatever the level of so-called interference there was, Martin had a lot of legal authority to fall back on, and that he simply shirked his duty. He walked away from an opportunity to cement that independence. Because if you say the president was interfering, and you had the capacity to demonstrate to the world that the president was interfering with all these letters, why then do you walk away? Tell the president that you are interfering. Tell the world that the president is interfering. And use your power to do the work you have to do. Because from the president's recounting of what has gone on, Martin has been given money. He hasn't been denied money. He has been given clearance to hire people. He hasn't been denied that. So he hasn't been denied the institutional fundamentals that will tell you that the interference is of a substantial nature. His interference that he's referring to now appears to be a request from the president to enforce some level of basic legal rules about natural justice. Because you do something about somebody, I didn't ask you to do it. You do a report and you bring it to me. And I say, oh.
Out of courtesy, he says.
Exactly.
He didn't bring it to the president who will have a comment.
Do you know what he was thinking? Because there is no precedent to what he did. There is no precedent. This is the first time in 3 or 4 years he's written. It has a very long title. Corruption, assessment, something. It's a very long title. It's the first one he's done. And in that report, he sent 2 reports to the presidency, by the way, a 13-pager before the 64-pager, which was released in public.
Conclusions and observations.
Yeah.
And then he brought the final one.
64-pager, he actually praises the president for the president's commitment in allowing him to do what he had to do. You understand? So if the president is allowing you to do what you have to do, how do you turn around and say that the president expected you to be a poodle? A poodle to what? So all you had to do was get up and say...
But he's given evidence. He provides meetings at which the president asked him to... In fact, he mentions a case where the chief of staff asked him to wait to hear from the president. He shouldn't act until he's heard from the president. I mean, that for him was an interference.
Yes. So the president has interfered. The chief of staff says, wait for a week. You have the law. It says nobody can interfere. You get up, come out, call the press. Chief of staff says I should wait for a week. I won't wait. I have to go and do this. Who can stop him? That's all he had to do. That's what I'm saying. Martin has missed a golden opportunity to establish the independence of this office. That is all Martin had to do. Tell the world, like he's telling the world now. So what's the benefit to all of us that these things happen, so I've resigned? So what?
I mean, this is a principle. This is a man of integrity.
Please. The man of integrity should have stood up to the plate. The man of integrity should have gone forward and said that I am going to continue this. And that this is what I intend to do, and I'll do it because I have the law behind me.
Do you at least concede that this asking of him to not act and wait for a week was clearly...
It was meant for a purpose. What kind of action was he going to do? It was meant for a purpose.
Under the architecture of that setup, there's no circumstance that a chief of staff should be asking a special prosecutor to wait for a week.
because the president was not there. The president wanted to have reactions under the principle of fair hearing. These are accusations you make against people. So motu, you set out to make those, accusations. And you served it on the president. What did you expect the president to do? Sit back and not do anything about it?
Mr. George.
At the end of the day, let me land. At the end of the day, adding all the circumstances, adding whatever has happened, we do not believe the New Patriotic Party is solidly behind the president. We do not believe the president has done anything that changed Martin's capacity to work, that reduced Martin's authority, that amended the law backing Martin. And therefore, there was nothing demanding of a resignation. Nothing. Because if you could resign on these exposures that you have made, you could have also made these exposures and continue with your work. Because the president can sack you. Nobody can sack you. Nobody can stop you going to court. And the people you felt the displeasure with, that the president sought to say, stay a week and protect, can always meet you in court. Because that is where you ultimately end up. Martin's word is not infallible. His report is not final. It can only be finalized by a court of law. So why run away from that duty?
Let me bring in Sam George. Sam George, what's your reaction to all this? And for me, for Manifesto Tracker, going to an election, how is the NDC looking at this? Or for you, as a member of the Public Accounts Committee?
Let me say a very good evening to our viewers, the good people of Bingo Pram Pram, who hopefully in about 19 days will return me to Parliament and vote overwhelmingly for President John Dramani Mahama. It's been a sad 72 hours as we get confirmation of what has been thoughts and conjecture, as has been described by some, of the tacit approval of corruption by the highest echelons of this government, of the Akufo-Addo government, and the fact that the president clearly was wearing borrowed veils of incorruptibility, and that he had overseen what is arguably the most corrupt era in the Fourth Republic. The earlier part of your show showed the CPI and the ratings of this government. It is not just perception. It's been evidenced by what we have seen. You see, I have read the response from the NPP and then the response from the Executive Secretary to the President in trying to denigrate Martin. And I've heard Honorable Yababi Ansama also say, make allusions to the fact that, and to some facts, and it beats my imagination how that logic is being pushed down the throats of Ghanaians and whether they think we can't think through. Making reference to Martin's letter, or Martin's 13-pager and 64-pager, where he commends the president for his actions in setting up the OSP, and using that to negate what Martin has said has been interference. It's mind-boggling. Martin did his 64-pager prior to the 16th of October, 2020. Sent it to the office of the president on the 16th of October, 2020. Was received on the 19th of October, 2020 by the president. Now, the president reviews it, and immediately on the day after he reviewed it, and at the time he had reviewed the work, the president had no inkling the details of Martin's work. So prior to that time, there would have been no basis for interference. As soon as the president gets inkling on the 19th of October, what is contained in the summary that he had out of Ketty, and on that score, I disagree with Martin. Martin had no business submitting a summary to the president, whether out of Ketty or whatever. Section 4.1 of the Special Prosecutors Act, that's Act 959 or something, it is clear he is not subject to the directions or authority of any established authority in Ghana. So he had no business under, whether by way of Ketty or anything, writing to the president, especially when in his report, his risk assessment, he indicts the president He indicts the president of taking actions that are inimical to the well-being of the state, actions bordering on corruption. He indicts President Akufo-Addo and indicts President Akufo-Addo's finance minister and other appointees of state. So why then do you show him courtesy when you have established prima facie in your risk assessment that the president and his ministers, or some of his ministers, have engaged in acts bordering on corruption, and you intend to open investigation?
But he didn't disclose that in that 68-page document.
It's in the 64-page document.
No, he said clearly in that statement, that thing, that this is not an investigation, and that it could be
fantastic.
Yeah.
If you read the quote.
But he didn't say, I will intend to.
Martin opened the door and made it clear that further investigation and prosecution
could arise.
Absolutely.
Arise, yes.
So, and that is the work of the special prosecutor.
But I know that's not the same as saying that I intend to.
The special prosecutor.
Anybody else could take that and do. Police code, CID code, EOCO code,
It doesn't matter
code.
who would investigate.
Yeah.
Bottom line, a prima facie case of corruption or corruption-related activity had been established against His Excellency President Akufo-Addo and some of his ministers, chief amongst them the finance minister, who is the president's cousin. Now, the argument the NPP is making, that Martin praises them, is moot, because the issue of interference arises when, after the president reads the document on the 19th, immediately instructs his chief of staff to summon Martin Amidu. She doesn't reach him until the 20th. Martin appears there on the 21st. He is told that the president directs me to tell you that he is in the Volta region, but that you should stay any further action until he returns. Don't forget section 4.1. Martin, or the special prosecutor, is not supposed to be under the direction of any individual. Again, Martin exercises what I think is a wrong judgment call by acceding to that call and waiting for the president. The president arrives and has a conversation with him on the 23rd of October. It is at that meeting on the 23rd that for the first time the president overtly makes the attempt to interfere and give direction to the special prosecutor by saying to him that, look, I want you to hold on to any further action for a week. Now, do not forget, from the 16th, when Martin sent his report to the presidency, to the 23rd, when the president finally met him, is already a week, where he had to wait for the president to finish his campaign tour of the Volta region and return. All that while holding his horses because the president, out of courtesy for the president. When the president returns, he says, give me another week. So 2 weeks are lost in the fight against corruption. He waits. He's invited on Sunday evening, Sunday the 1st of November, 2020. When he meets the president engages in a negotiation with Martin for him to accept from the president comments by the finance minister. I am told.
Natural justice.
Absolutely not.
You reject
the rules of natural justice would apply when Martin opens prosecution in the court. Then anybody who is the subject of his prosecution, the rules of natural justice would apply. The person will have their day in court.
But you've said that he's made adverse findings against
his adverse findings. His adverse findings.
But the finance minister had not been given a hearing.
Listen, he doesn't need to be given a hearing before the special prosecutor. He will get a hearing before a competent court of jurisdiction. The special prosecutor does not jail anybody. He doesn't have the power to jail. He has the power to prosecute. Charlotte Osei was asked to step aside when a prima facie case was established against her.
Because that's what the Constitution says.
Not just about Charlotte Osei, about every public officer. That when a prima facie case is established against you and they initiate prosecution, you go to court. The rules of our court demand that they give full disclosure. You get all the documents the prosecution intends to use, and you go ahead to defend yourself. So for the president to now become a postman for the finance minister, the finance ministry was copied in that courtesy letter that was sent to the president. If the finance ministry had a response, why did they not send it to the OSP? Why did it have to take our president to invite Martin on Sunday evening, 1st of November, and urge him to shelve his report and accept a response from the finance ministry and work with that. And the president says he will handle the matters. Since when did the president become a broker and an arbiter for people who prima facie cases have been established against
the president's direct employee?
And he's his cousin, states that. But the point is, it is not the business of the president. If the president was truly interested in the fight against corruption, when a prima facie case was established against Abu Gapele, who was an employee at the time of John Dramani Mahama, what did John Mahama do? Did he seek to engage the Attorney General? When the boss of the National Service Secretariat, a prima facie case was established against him by the auditor, by the Attorney General, did John Mahama seek to interfere and broker a deal? No. He allowed the institutions of state do their job. That is what accounted for the high CPI score. President Akufo-Addo, and that's why Martin in his letter says he sought to be a judge in his own cause, who himself had been cited for having taken actions that border on corruption, trying to pass assent to a bill and give it retrospective action when the Constitution of Ghana is clear. No law shall take retrospective action. The Minerals Income Investment Amendment Bill, which President Akufo-Addo assented to and gave retrospective action, was against the Constitution of this country.
Let me ask you this.
The executive approval he gave for the whole Ejapa royalties deal was again bordering on corruption.
Let me ask you this. I mean, since that, I'm sure you've seen the latest government response, the detailed one. What do you make of that? In the details that it lays out about Martin's constant rejection of buildings, because one of the key things he cited was the frustration he was going through in his access and accommodation, and the funding that was given it to make it work. It goes a go back, of course, we're having a manifesto conversation about the commitment that it illustrates to get the office functioning. What do you make of that?
Even respectfully, I think that we shouldn't befuddle the issues. The issues we are talking about here, issues of whether Martin was given a skyscraper or a boys' quarters.
But Martin complains. That same document you cite as his resignation letter was a complaint of his.
Evans, what is of primary concern to you as a Ghanaian voter and our viewer? Is it whether Martin was given a skyscraper or a bungalow? Or is it that in the Ejapa deal, the president and ministers of state acted in ways that will shortchange the taxpayer and personally benefit them?
Yeah, I mean, so that's what is interesting to you.
That's what's interested. That's what matters. Look, we don't care whether our special prosecutor is working from a skyscraper or from a bungalow. Yeah. What we are interested in is that the people we voted for, who promised to protect the public purse, are they raping the public purse?
So, but I guess,
are we going to give them 4 more years to rape the public purse? So,
for me, it's just a question about Martin, because this conversation has come up because remember Martin put a resignation letter in the public. We got to know his problem.
Sure.
You've heard the government side now.
Yes.
In detail. And my question to you is, what do you make of that detailed government response?
It's much ado about nothing. It's a lot of English, a lot of verbosity, but very lacking in substance. Like I said to you, look, I have the response here. I've gone through it. You know, even from the first paragraph, where they try to paint a picture that Martin is speaking from both sides of his mouth by praising the president, and in the same vein saying that the president was interfering. It just beats my imagination that Nana Santi Bedioto, who is the executive secretary, is a lawyer. Can't he just look at the dates and realize that Martin's letter references dates of interference, which are subsequent to the date on which the letter where he praised the president and his commitment to setting up the OSP is obvious. It preceded it. So how would he, except you expected Martin to be Nostradamus and predict the future, how would he have, in the 16th October letter, predicted what the president would try to do? The president would try to negotiate with him to shelve an investigation on the 1st of November. 2 clear weeks after. He couldn't possibly have known that. So it tells you that even the premise on which this whole 40 or 39 paragraph response is much ado about nothing. Again, the question he said, why did Martin not just refuse the overtures and walk away? If you read Martin's, not the official resignation, the press release, Martin speaks about the fact that President Rawlings of blessed memory had been a shield and a protection for him. And he talks about the fact that with the passing of President Rawlings, the threats that on his life, these were his exact words. He says, I am prepared, the events of 12 November 2020, which is the death of President Rawlings, removed the only protection I had from the threats and plans directed at me for undertaking the Ejapa Royalty Limited Transaction Anti-Corruption Assessment Report and dictates that I resign as the special prosecutor immediately. Fear is the enemy of change, and I am prepared from the vacuum created on 12th November 2020, listen, to meet the threats of my demise as the price to pay for serving my country without fear or favor, affection or ill will. If you are in this country and you are minded by the fact that similar instances where persons used and mentioned the president and occupants of the office of the president's name in the number 12 undercover work by Anas Arimeyaw Anas, and that one of Anas's associates, Ahmed Twali, was helping in uncovering and helping state prosecution to build a solid case to prosecute, and Ahmed Twali was killed and murdered in this country, and it's been over a year, and we don't even have a primary suspect being tried. And Martin is telling you that there are threats of demise or against his life and person. You think he'll be a fool to have stayed on?
Let me bring in Mr. Babasama. So, on this subject, obviously, the big conversation is what happened next to the Office of Special Prosecutor, which you created. It's not in your 2020 manifesto, but you now have an opportunity to appoint somebody else because you have 6 months. I mean,
what is put in our 2020 manifesto?
The Office of Special Prosecutor.
It is an ongoing...
No, my point is, it is a 2016 creation, the manifesto.
Yeah.
Going forward into 2021 to 2020, read your manifesto. You account for what you've done with it. I'm talking about going forward now in the wake of what has happened.
You don't repeat a going institution in a manifesto.
No, but I've seen you say, for example, in other instances, what you intend, for example, the Office of the Right Information. You're now saying you provide resources. I mean, that's, you're looking forward.
Exactly.
Yeah. My question is, now with all that has happened, what happens to that office now going forward for the MPP? Because you created it. It's your baby.
The office is in being. It needs somebody who can work at it. So the next thing, to my mind, is very straightforward. Appoint the next occupant of the office. It is a legal office. It's founded and based on law. All its conditions of tenure are there. One of the conditions of tenure is that the person in charge can resign. The person is protected for 7 years in that office. Martin chose to resign. So now the president will have to appoint somebody else. And that you don't have to repeat the existence of the Office of Special Prosecutor in subsequent manifestos. It has become part of the legal fabric of this republic.
Nothing will change with all that has happened in terms of the architecture
of the office?
Of the office?
It was still born in the sense of Martin's capacity. It's there. Everything is there yet to be executed because Martin did not execute. So
the problem was for you is Martin and not the
architecture. I don't
architecture.
think there's anything wrong with the office as set up at all. The only thing, and it is still the bottom line in this, it's not about prima facie, it's not about going back to murdered journalists. Journalists were being murdered in John Mahama's era, and nobody has been found. Several journalists were murdered, maltreated. It's not about murdered journalists and prima facie cases. It is about the ability of...
Make a note. I'll come to you.
It is about the ability of somebody in that office.
He's raised a point. I mean, I've made the point about being factual. When you say journalists have...
And then the chap who was on the motorbike from Brown, what's his name? Said something, the regional chairman of the GJA and all that. So what's different? Is that not a fact? Were they not murdered? Let's move on. They were murdered.
He said journalists.
They were murdered. Are they not journalists? Is Samuel Leni not a journalist? Is the guy who was on the motorbike not a journalist? The guy who was doing the investigative report that was shot on the motorbike, was he not a journalist?
Which guy is that?
I forget his name. It will come up. If you Google it, you will get it.
Your substantive point is?
You know, Evans, you know about that story. You know. My substantive point is that the office as constituted and the law gives us the best chance of dealing with impunity. The biggest problems in this country about corruption is impunity of public procurement. Impunity. That's the problem. People feel that they can get away with it.
A problem you haven't solved in 4 years.
Yes, because we have demonstrated that the fundamental structures which should have been founded on the law were not put in place in order for a vigorous effort to take place. Because by Martin, by the occupant of the office. Somebody must set up the office. Martin was supposed to set up the office.
I'm interested. Just let me clarify. So the government failure to deal with these fundamentals is because of Martin, or procurement issues is because of Martin?
But the story out there is clear.
That
Martin was given the resources. Did he exploit them? Have you read the...
So all these issues you mentioned, procurement, it's all because of Martin?
I don't understand what you mean.
I mean, just clarity.
Yes, but he is the head of the office. The government gives you 4 buildings, 2 of which you chose yourself. You reject them after they are set up. Is it the government's fault?
What about ABAJ's own responsibility in this? Because he directly is the boss of the...
Yeah, but ABAJ gave procurement approval. Martin's office had procurement cover.
Yeah, but he himself was allegedly, as of course it's something he's going to contest, was involved in deals that has led to
So he stopped Martin from working? I thought we were talking about the OSP.
Yeah, first of all, you made a point about part of the biggest problem we have is procurement.
Exactly.
And you said Martin failed to
deal with
the problem.
Yes.
So but the man himself, who was the head of the procurement authority, was himself involved in alleged corruption.
I'm going to the gravamen of the matter. Okay. Let me land. The point I'm making is that the OSP law gives that power to deal with procurement issues, impunity issues decisively. That power is the independent capacity to suo motu, personally by themselves, initiate, investigate, and prosecute corruption in the courts. So whether you are an incumbent government, whether you are out of authority, whatever your status, Martin has the right, as at the time he was in the office, to investigate you with or without your consent, whether the president said wait for a week or 2 weeks, whether the president had conversations, whatever the conversations were, Martin could still go ahead and say that. He
said he had an intention.
Notwithstanding these conversations. Yeah, so why did he resign? That is the point I'm making. He had the power. Why did he resign? Martin had the power to walk out of any conversation with the president and afterwards go and say, well, this guy needs to be indicted. The president himself needs to be, let me test the water. I'm taking the president to court for asking me to wait for 2 weeks because he's interfering with my work. And who would have stopped him? Only the court could have stopped him. Because that's the ultimate for Martin. So Martin could have gone to court and said, I have a prima facie case against the finance minister. He is whatever the prima facie case is supposed to be according to the report, the long-headed report. So he gets in there, and what's stopping him? Because the president had a conversation with him. So we need somebody who will use that authority. It is that authority that was not used, which is the missing link. That's the point I'm making. Because the authority is there. It was passed by Parliament. The authority to do the thing that you have to do against impunity is there in the law. It is not in the hands of the president. It's not in the hands of the chief of staff. It is in the hands of the special prosecutor, who happened to be Martin. And you don't need a 10-story building before you can take somebody to court on the so-called prima facie things he was saying. He still managed to develop a 64-page report in a 2-bedroom bungalow office without his staff or whatever. He still managed to develop that report. So what was stopping Martin? What was stopping Martin from executing the mandate that the law had given him?
I've heard some of your colleagues say it had a political motive. Would you?
Had a what?
It had a political motive.
Yeah, but if you listen to the
NDC,
if you listen to the NDC, which doesn't like him, the NDC which took him to Supreme Court to stop him from being special prosecutor, now dancing around his departure happily, then of course one can infer that as well. One can infer.
So you agree with that? Those saying that?
I don't agree.
Okay.
With
just wanted to clarify.
I agree with those who believe, and I'm a chief proponent of that Martin has not been fair to Ghana. Martin has not been fair to the office that he was asked to set up. Martin has not delivered the capacity that that office could have, and it would have made a difference to the way corruption is perceived in this country and how it is fought.
Let's broaden the conversation beyond Martin. I'll come to you, but I just want to broaden.
To conclude on that, okay. I think his history. We need to move beyond Martin.
I'm going to take a break. When I come, I'll hear from you, Mr. Sam George. And then we'll go to analyzing some of the key things that we had brought up earlier. The CPI data that we showed, I'll get them to respond to it. And then a few questions about the promises that they put forward, some of the specifics that they need to provide. Stay with me. Thank you for staying with me on Manifesto Tracker. I want to quickly wrap up on this, Martin Amidu, and let's spend the last 15 minutes exploring some of the key issues that we brought up. If you don't mind, you know you had something to say on Martin Amidu before, so that I can quickly move on.
Just so that we are clear, when I made reference to Ahmed Swale was a journalist who was investigating actions in which members of 7 of the government had been mentioned, and he was murdered. No journalist investigating or doing anything on the government or any appointee of President Mahama was murdered. 2 different scenarios. Manasseh Azuri did his work under peace and quiet. We've seen what has happened to him in the days under this government. Even today, your airing of a scandal, we saw what happened to your signal. Now, when Martin talks about interference, Honorable Yawabi Asamoah has been accused of Martin Amidu of being one of the people who wants to dictate to him what to do as Attorney General, as Special Prosecutor. And I'll read for you. On the 24th of July 2019, Martin Amidu descended on him and said, this is what he said. Let me read a story. Special Prosecutor Martin Amidu has descended on the Communications Director for the NPP, Yawabi Asamoah, in his latest epistle. According to Mr. Amidu, Mr. Yawabi Asamoah has on many instances created the impression in the public mind that he has the authority to instruct the Special Prosecutor on how to deliver on his mandate. The latest attempt by Honorable Yawabi Asamoah, a Member of Parliament for Adenta in his capacity as Communication Director of the NPP, to tacitly direct and control my functions as a Special Prosecutor is contained in interviews he gave to the media in response to clarifications I made in an interview with TTFM Breakfast Show. Goes on and on and on and on. And that had to do with the Charles Bishop case. So the attempts to interfere and tell Martin what to do is not just one that's reserved for the president. Even Mazinia sitting here as Communications Director of the NPP has sought to tell him.
But because Martin alleges...
Hold your horses. Well, we all heard the press conference by Yawabi.
I mean, so do you accept what he said about Airbus? Then
you see, it's
just...
Forgive me, Martin. Forgive me, Ivan.
Yeah.
But this is irresponsible journalism.
No, we
are discussing... No.
I mean, it's a question I asked you about.
Forgive me. Forgive me. It's a senseless question.
No.
I won't answer it.
It is.
I won't answer it.
It is.
I won't answer it.
You've made a point.
I am discussing Martin and the point he's made.
It's about logic, right? It's about logic.
Don't befuddle the issue.
It's not.
It's irresponsible journalism.
You've made a point.
Don't go there.
You've made a point. I mean, see, I said at the beginning, I said be decorous.
I am.
And apply to everybody else.
I'm being very decorous here. You are heckling
my job? No, I'm not.
As a host.
No, we set out. Don't do that.
Go ahead and ask your question.
The question is a simple one.
Okay.
You've said that Martin Amidu has alleged that he was interfering. My question to you was, because he said it, doesn't necessarily mean that it is a factual and it's true? And you said yes. And my follow-up to you was that if that's the case, would you also accept that what he said about Joe Bahama was also factual and true?
We have told him that his comments were stupid and an act of cowardice. He has not been able to contest that. So that's my answer to that. So I'm not going to befuddle the issues on that. But the point here that we're speaking about, with respect to Martin Amidu's resignation and the attempts by agents of state to interfere with his work, are clearly spelled out. Even if you read the executive secretary's response.
I guess my point was, my fundamental point, are you suggesting that he was also interfering?
Martin has made the case, and we had heard him hold press conferences asking Martin what was going on with investigations. That was not in his place as communications director.
Somebody's press conference amounts to an interference in the work of the Special Prosecutor.
Well, if you don't find it as that, leave it to your viewers to decide.
That is what I'm probing.
It is interesting that even in the response by the Secretary to the President in paragraph 10, they are trying to ask Martin questions about the Airbus and direct him, why did he not prosecute the Airbus? Look, we have challenged anybody who thinks they have a case in the Airbus to bring it on. But that's not what we're discussing here. Look, when today,
briefly,
everybody, I am wrapping up. When today everybody in the MPP is trying to paint a picture that Martin Amidu was not fit for the office or has not shown that he was fit for the office, they fail to realize one thing. They're inducting President Akufo-Addo in his sense of decision making. President Akufo-Addo saw the myriad of people in this country, had the opportunity under no pressure and duress, chose Martin Amidu. And today, we are being told that Martin was not fit for purpose. The decision and choice of President Akufo-Addo, well, it's fine. It explains why our nation is in the mess it's in. Because the president has, with that same sense of decision making, that same sense of judgment, has appointed 125 ministers who are not performing, has appointed chief executives who are engaged in one scandal after the other.
I want to move on to
corruption after the other.
I want to move on. It
tells you the quality of decision making the man we voted for 4 years ago has brought to the table.
So I want to move on to the.
So thank them thanks to them for establishing the decision making prowess of President Akufo-Addo.
I want to move on to.
He's a poor decision maker.
I want to move on to the thing I said earlier about.
Conclude.
I mean, no, but there's a fundamental question I want to ask first.
Yes.
Which is.
I need to conclude on the
office
of the special.
I'm moving on. We've concluded. Now, you concluded before I came to him. Just for you spoke twice, and I want to move on now. I was talking earlier when we did analysis about the, goes to the record, about the CPI. You worked at the agency that develops this, and it shows that if you look at the trend, that John Mahama still holds the record for our best performance in the last decade with 48%. And if you see the trend, as you showed, it's quite gone down under this current administration. In terms of track record going into an election on the manifesto basis, it appears on the CPI alone, they have a better record than you. You accept that on the face of that evidence?
On the face of the graph, yes. On the face of the graph, yes.
What's the remedy?
I can't tell, because I believe that in our time, the environment is more open. Standards are expected to be higher. There's more talk. There's more debate. And I believe that that goes down to create the impression that there's lots more corruption when it cannot be the case. The fact when you aerate, people are free to aerate and people are free to make preposterous claims. People are free to make claims beyond where they are not substantiated and otherwise, yet in an environment of freedom. I think that it can impact perception. But I can't explain scientifically what's going on. But on the face of your graph...
I mean, it's not mine, it's...
on
it's
the face
CPI.
of the graph,
yeah. I mean, Sanjot, quickly on this.
Look, the CPI is a reflection of the facts on the ground. Under the Mahama administration, you had a sunshine campaign that was waged on corruption. So when a whistleblower spoke about the National Service Scheme thing, His Excellency scandal, His Excellency President Mahama at the time instructed the BNI to open investigations and put over 100 people before court for prosecution. Monies were recovered to the state. When the issues about the bus banding came up, the state had an open discussion around it. A minister of state resigned. Monies were recovered by the state. When the JIDA scandal happened, the JIDA scandal was an investigation that had commenced by the state. Manasseh came on board. There was a sunshine campaign about it. A former member of parliament, or at that time it was a former member of parliament, and at the time a chief executive, Abu Gapili, and the businessman were jailed. That is what gave people confidence in saying that this government was fighting corruption. The reverse is the case now. You've had scandals like the PDS scandal. You've had the BOST scandal. When the BOST scandal happened, the minister at the time, Boakye Jackson, set up a multi-stakeholder investigative body, including civil society. What did you see? The same President Akufo-Addo quickly asked the BNI to put a report. The BNI was supposed to be part of that committee, put up a report and exonerated the man. That was the end of that investigation. The Australian visa scandal caused national embarrassment, international embarrassment to Ghana. What is happening? The young man is still walking around as the Deputy Minister of State. BOST, well, I've mentioned BOST, the PDS one. The president told us that it was vitiated by fraud and crime and criminality. Who has the president put before court for the PDS scandal that went on for a year? I mean, the Galamsey fraud thing, where Charles Bissiou was caught on tape. What has happened to it? Paul and Associates, what has happened to it? The missing excavators, what has happened to it? This is why people do not believe that this president is fighting corruption.
Clarify this for me. I mean, this comes back to a manifesto.
Yes.
Just before we go, because that's key for me, we highlighted in their analysis. Operation Sting, right?
Yeah.
Governmental reforms as part of Integrity for Development Action Plan.
Yes.
What is that plan?
The plan is to make crime and corruption in public sector a high-risk enterprise.
How?
Have you been stung by a scorpion before? That's what the sting, the pain you feel.
I want.
So,
what is architecture?
So the architecture is going to see institutional reforms. If you look in our manifesto, we speak about passing a legislation that would allow the judicial service to retain a portion of their internally generated fund and put it into a fund for creation of infrastructure, improving infrastructure. So, the judicial service has had the best input in infrastructure under the NDC administration, the new court premises. We are talking about making sure that we have more high courts, a more digital system. The e-justice program was a World Bank program, $93 million. At that time, I was at the Ministry of Communication when Dr. Manibuama signed the compact with the World Bank. We did the reform for e-justice. Okay, so the digitization of our courts, expansion of court infrastructure, making sure that the pursuit of justice against corrupt public officials will not be a long drawn-out process, but will be expedited and justice will be served to the people of Ghana, is what we talk about when we talk about integrity for development action plan.
Current state, briefly, will you keep it or something will change under this broad integrity development plan action?
I believe that the NDC had a roadmap in 2016 where we said that we're going to delineate the Attorney General's office from the Ministry of Justice.
So that will happen going forward.
I believe that we will look at an integrated plan.
Yeah, I mean, if you can indicate for me, going to next 4 years, what will change in your anti-corruption fight?
We are on a solid track, and it will only improve. We are on a very solid track. When you make noises about PDS, that you just shout. That is what creates the impression that there's corruption, even when the substance is not there. So we are focused. We have a major instrument, which is the Office of Special Prosecutor. Somebody capable is going to occupy that office. We have RTI. The commission is going to be set up. People will have access to information. We have the best environment for citizen participation ever. When you establish that commission with the OSP, we are resourcing the agencies that impact public sector, especially the Auditor General's office. From a situation in 2012 where they couldn't even buy equipment, now they have the highest level of logistics support ever. We are investing in digital systems across board, reducing contact between human beings and the sources of corruption. And if you go to the justice sector, that is where probably most of the stuff has happened. So it's not about waiting for the NDC. We are already doing e-stuff, like mobile interoperability, where they were going to put it in for several billions, and we have put it in for a few millions, and it is helping all of us. So if we push digitization forward the way we are, and that's what we are going to do, let me read this intent of ours before we go. This is what this is what we are doing.
This is the second bite on this. You gave me only one shot.
Allow me to moderate. I gave you last
ranting,
to wrap up. He's wrapping up. He's reading that. I will wrap
He
up.
started.
No.
Yes.
No. I came back to you. And that was it. Read your last quote.
This is the plan.
It is believable.
This is the plan.
Don't do that. We set the rules.
I was supposed to respond, and then you went on break.
No, and I came to you.
And then I responded. Then you started
this conversation.
this new conversation.
And I came to
him.
you respond. I came to him. This is the last. Go on. Read your.
This is the plank on which we are moving forward into the next 4 years. We are curbing bribery and corruption through greater transparency in a digitized environment. In a digitized environment. And we have several things we are doing beyond.
Briefly in 30 seconds.
Briefly in 30 seconds, of course. Just like our manifesto says, briefly in 30 seconds means that we are accelerating digitization. We are going to continue to strengthen the relevant institutions, including Parliament, the judiciary, Shraj, where all the budgetary allocations are being increased dramatically, so that you have an interlocking array of actors to support anti-corruption.
Okay.
That is how anti-corruption is best.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Can I speak for 30 seconds? Just
we don't have 30
15 seconds.
But-
In this time, he says they are supporting the Auditor General.
Okay, 15 seconds you do.
They are supporting
15 seconds you do.
They are supporting the Auditor.
You've caved
No,
into that.
They are supporting the Auditor General.
I am the chief supervisor of the time, but give me 10, 50 seconds.
They are supporting the
All the
Auditor
ranting.
General. They are
No,
supporting the
after
Auditor
all the
General
ranting.
by asking him to proceed on leave.
After all,
Clap for this
that's
man.
all you have.
That's all you have to say. But here's the thing. As we laid the foundation from the start, your use of the words irresponsible journalism has to be withdrawn. I haven't taken offense, but respect from my audience. You can't use that in the context of any question they're about to ask. Use that on me.
That was more.
You actually said it was a senseless question.
Wait. You have to withdraw that. You know that it has to be withdrawn. I didn't take offense.
Very well.
But you have to withdraw.
Very well. It's been withdrawn if you take offense to it.
No, I just said I'm not taking offense, but you have to respect my audience.
Very well, and I've done that.
Okay,
I've done that.
good.